The following is a letter from Carpus ben Jehiel to Simon ben Camathas, the high priest of Judea before Caiaphas. It was found amongst the sea scrolls and has some very interesting content, especially in regards to the fate of Saint Joseph the carpenter. Dearest Simon ben Camathas, it is I, Carpus ben Jehiel. It has been quite some time since we last spoke, and hope retirement is treating you kindly. I always told you that Ananias would never lose grip on the high priesthood. I'm sure he worked diligently to dispose of you in favor of his son-in-law. That family, I tell you, they care little for the scriptures. It's all about the power and wealth. I have no doubt that bribes are being accepted by the Roman governor to allow Caiaphas to remain in charge. That unclean serpent of a man Ananias is. That brief year under your leadership as high priest was probably the greatest we have seen since the death of Herod. I pray that I may ever see the glorious days of the Hasmonean again. The purpose of this letter is to not discuss the political situation at the present. That can be saved for another letter, or better, a long overdue meeting. I should come down sometime in the near future, but I fear that what I have learned will prevent me from doing so. The simple lifestyle of the Galileans has charmed me, and it holds me back from returning to the commotion of Judea. If I am to remain here, even if it's the last place I ever see, then I am happy. I pity you, my old friend, that you must stay within that corrupt circle of priests in Jerusalem. I forgot that you are one of the holiest men of our time, and your devotion and love for the scriptures is what holds you there, and I respect you for that. Anyway, the purpose of this letter is in regards to that boy we have encountered in the temple 16 years ago. You know exactly who I speak of, for you are constantly asking me in every letter if I have seen him back home in Galilee. He surely left a great impression upon you. There is actually a great deal of events that have taken place since we last spoke, and they all seem to revolve around this child, or man as he is now. You may be thinking how I can be so certain that this man is the same child. To answer that, I was able to confirm it all with his own mother. But the statements of his father have greatly troubled me. I've decided to write to you to let you decide on what to believe. I can confirm that everything that was stated by his father Joseph has been confirmed by his mother Mary. I fear that my recent acquiring of the same knowledge that they hold will put me in great danger. I do not know what will become of me after writing this letter, but its purpose is solely for you to investigate yourself. I know how much this child has taken over your thoughts. His name is Jesus. Let me begin by recounting the event that we both witnessed with the child. It will come into context later on. It was the Passover during the 6th year of Ananias' high priesthood. The festivities had ended and the crowds were starting to disperse from Jerusalem. We were both in the temple doing our daily prayer when we were startled by the presence of a child who was surrounded by a group of 5 other priests. At the time, we didn't think much of it. Only later did we realize that we had never seen these men before. We were so convinced that we knew them, yet even Ananias could not recall who they were. This will make sense soon. We were both amazed by the knowledge that this child had of the scriptures. It was something that we had never seen in any child before. And the questions that he asked, they were so deep, requiring a well-versed knowledge of the scriptures, that even we could not answer some of them. We sat there in the inner temple with the other 5 priests listening so intently to this child that we paid no heed to the days that had passed us. It wasn't until his mother Mary arrived calling out in relief to her son that it startled us back to our senses. She begged the priest not to hurt her son and that she was terribly sorry for neglecting him. None of them said anything to her. The two of us were the only ones who spoke to her and told her of what her son was doing and how amazed we were by his knowledge of the scripture. We couldn't believe it when she told us that he had been here for 3 days. It was certain that it had only been an hour at the most. And I don't know about you, but I never forgot the look of horror that the father Joseph had upon his face when he saw his son amongst us all. It was strange, because between the moment that she had startled us until she had her son and left the temple, the other 5 priests had vanished. No trace of them was there at all. No doubt this had plagued your mind ever since, and I'm going to provide you with some closure on that. Like you, the strange phenomenon had never left my mind, and it was what brought me to Galilee in the first place. Forgive me for telling you this now, but I had found Jesus a lot earlier than you should have been told. A lot earlier. You see, not long before you became high priest, I moved to the town of Nazareth where I reunited with my sister's family, and there I remained preaching in the synagogue there. This would be where I found the family again. They would pray at the synagogue quite frequently, and I began to get to know them. Mary was a truly beautiful woman, of both looks and charity. Joseph was a hard-working, caring father, who seemed to hold some sort of weight on his shoulders that he had been failing to hide. It was obvious to me, and I wanted to learn more about him. I stayed in Nazareth ever since, growing closer and closer with the family, getting to know this child who was a remarkable human. He was one of the most kind, gentle, and knowledgeable people that I had ever met. I was constantly blown away by some of the things that he had said. No young man should have such wisdom. Strangely enough, the same thing was occurring up here in Nazareth as it did to us in the temple. The strange presence of other people who I was certain that I knew, only for them to vanish from sight upon being startled. I couldn't explain it, and I tried studying it subtly when it did occur, but it was like my mind could simply not comprehend the event. As much as I tried to deny my accusations, my mind would always reassure me that the people were actually there, and I did know them. This happened many times when Jesus was in the synagogue, and I had no doubt that it happened even more when I was not around. This began to trouble me so much that I decided to ask Joseph about it, and whether he could confirm to me what this strange phenomenon was that I wasn't quite able to understand yet. Joseph looked at me in shock when I asked him. "I don't know what you're talking about, Carpus. That sounds absurd," he would reply to me. I was sure by the tone of his voice that this was not the case and that he was actually aware of it too, but just didn't want to say so. I began to give up on trying to come up with an explanation to these strange appearances of people around Jesus. It was frustrating me so much that I decided to leave Nazareth for Tiberias, just to clear my head and get some nice breeze from the Sea of Galilee. Now we come to the events of the past few months. I was making a sacrifice in the Tiberias synagogue when I was interrupted by the huffing and puffing of one who had ran a marathon. It was Joseph. He was holding a sack containing some items within it. He fell to his knees in front of my startled self and he wept. "Oh, Carpus, I should have told you. I should have told you it all. But I fear it's too late now. It's happened. What the angel said has finally come to pass. The boy is dead," he sobbed. "Dead," I exclaimed in startlement. The thought of one so blessed as Jesus being dead was greatly shocking. "How? What has happened, Joseph?" I lifted Joseph to his feet and tried comforting him in his hysterics. "Where is Mary? Is she coping all right?" I asked him. Joseph shook his head in denial. "It's all her fault. That harlot." I was moved by pity at seeing a man act in such a way. "Joseph, please tell me everything." Joseph began. Mary conceived of Jesus outside of wedlock. My eyes widened upon hearing this. That was a true scandal. She must surely have been blessed to escape stoning for such a treacherous act to her betrothed. She was seeing another man at the time, and ended up pregnant with him not long after we had become engaged. It was hard because I truly loved her, and I didn't want her to be stoned. I tried to divorce her silently, even as the resentment to her began to grow. But then I was stopped in my tracks by some angels. They were terrifying to behold, and they held me at knife point and ordered me not to divorce Mary, and to call the child my own. They told me that there was a great plan installed for the child, and I was to help see it come to pass. More so out of fear of their divine wrath, I accepted out of fear of my life, and I remained married to Mary. We ended up going all the way to Bethlehem to have the child. Once Mary gave birth, a great and almighty star was risen above the location of where we were. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before, yet no one who was present at the place of birth could recall such a star. The star was not intended for human eyes. Rather, a coalition of angels arrived at the stable, dressed in the disguises of shepherds and 3 wise men of the East. The 3 of the East were the most powerful of the angels, and they provided 3 gifts for Jesus. These gifts had some sort of special power, and I had no doubt that they were to play a large role in their eventual plans. I know not when they are to happen, but I am certain that the time has come. Joseph handed me the bag that he was carrying. Inside was some frankincense, myrrh, and gold. I studied them. "These are those gifts," Joseph said. I immediately put them back into the bag and handed it back to Joseph. "I don't want to be involved in this, Joseph," I said. Joseph shook his head in denial before forcing it in my hands. "I have no choice, Carpus. You are the only one that I can trust. You are the only one who has seen the angels firsthand." Firsthand? What was he talking about? "I'm sorry, I may be a holy man, but I have never been given the privilege of seeing one of those Lord's angels," I said to him. I was starting to think that he was a madman. "Yes, you have," he shouted back. "You saw them at the temple all those years ago. You have also seen them throughout Jesus' life. Don't you understand? That strange phenomena you were troubled by was the angels coming to rear Jesus further, disguised as people, letting off the impression that you knew them. You truly are wise, for you were the only one to question and see through this guise, it seems." Alas, I had some sort of explanation as to what the strange experience was, but I was still skeptical. "Why couldn't you have told me this when I asked, instead of shutting me off like you did?" I asked sternly. "Because you would have killed me if I told you then. Now I have nothing left to lose." I was getting annoyed and fearful at the same time with Joseph's remarks. "Joseph, I demand an explanation to this sudden desperateness. What happened to Jesus?" Joseph took a deep breath and continued. "The angels have been rearing Jesus all these years for their plan, and that plan was to make him become an extremely faithful and powerful young man, so powerful that a part of God was able to enter into him when the bridge between faith can be made. That occurred last week when Jesus went to John the Baptist to be baptized. I had heard of a homeless prophet in the desert preaching of the coming Messiah, but never thought anything of it, other than another rabid claimer of the Essenes. At the moment John lifted him from the water, the boy that I had once known was no more. He was dead, but in his shell there was the presence of another. It was the presence of God. After the ceremony, he came to me and Mary. He was followed by a large number of angels who were no longer in their human disguises. He told us that he was going into the desert to speak with his enemy. Upon returning, he told Mary that he would take the 3 gifts and begin the great conversion. They then left. I immediately felt a huge weight lift from my shoulders. I was freed from the oath of fear that I made to the angels. The child was reared, and now the angels had him for themselves. I had nothing left to do. I made plans to officially divorce Mary and return to Jerusalem to be far away from the lie that I had been living. It's funny because I didn't even return home with Mary that evening. I had already made my mind up in my heart, and I went straight to my family in Gamala, leaving Mary to go alone to Nazareth. But my newfound freedom was quickly restrained when I came face to face with another angel. This angel seemed different to the others, and he was in some sort of desperation. I wasn't able to get his name, but he told me that God's plan was not what it seemed. The 3 gifts needed to be taken far away, so that the angels and Jesus could not use them. There was a great power bestowed onto them that no angel can possess in their natural form. Only a human could hold. This angel told me that the situation was dire, and that I had to take the 3 gifts and get rid of them as quickly as I could. He told me that when Jesus would return from the desert, I was likely to be killed, so this was the only opportunity to do it. I was the only one who knew other than Mary and was the only hope of putting a wound in the plans of God. I hate to admit it to you, Carpus, but I am vengeful to God. Vengeful for taking nearly 30 good years of my life away from me. How dare they hold a knife to my throat and force me into assisting their plans? Force me to assist in the cover-up of an unfaithful woman who should have been stoned. I did just as the angel had said, and I took the 3 gifts, and here they are now. Joseph looked desperately into my eyes. They will arrive in Nazareth soon, and will begin searching for these gifts. I'll be dead soon, but they will not know that you have them. I don't care what you do with them, but you need to take them. Do whatever you think is best, but just know that they will be looking for them. Now please, let me retire and enjoy the last few days of my life before they find me. And with that, Joseph left the synagogue, leaving me stunned and lost for words. I didn't know if I should believe him or not, but even if it was as severe as he had made it out to be, I sure did not want to get involved in it now. I hid the 3 gifts in my residence inside my bedroll, and I made my way to Nazareth to speak to Mary and see if she could confirm what Joseph had told me. Upon arriving at the house that I had become all too familiar with, I was met by the ghost of the former beauty that Mary was. She had aged drastically, and it seemed that sorrow had shrouded her. "Mary, where is Joseph?" I asked her, to see if she would provide any hint at his running off. Mary turned around and smiled half-heartedly. "He's gone. He came to his senses and left the harlot that I am." I was greatly moved by this, and went to comfort her as she began to weep over the window. "You are no harlot, Mary. You are a caring, devoted mother who has reared an amazing son. You should be proud of his achievements," I said to her. "I am proud of him, and I truly love him. But how can I live this lie any longer? The angels promised to cover up my treachery if I allowed them to use my son for their purposes." She looked deep into my eyes and said words that I would never forget. "What mother would sacrifice their child to cover up their sins?" She continued to burst into tears. "I saw Joseph," I began. "He told me everything. Do you believe it? Do you really think that your son is gone?" Mary closed her eyes as she half-heartedly nodded. "In my mind, I know their plan has come to pass and my son is gone. All that remains is a shell for the Lord to reside in. In my heart, my boy is still alive though, and I can't accept that he's no longer the child I knew." At that moment, we were both startled by the presence of a man entering into the room. "Woman, I have returned," they said. It was Jesus. Mary immediately ran to the shell of her son and wrapped her arms around him. Jesus just stood there stoically and fixed his gaze upon me. "Who is this man?" he said in a very authoritative voice.
"Don't you remember?" Mary began. "This is Carpus Ben Jehiel, the priest who used to visit us when you were younger."
Jesus cared little for me and moved away from his mother and went to search for the 3 gifts. He looked around the room where he knew that it was, but nothing could be seen. "Woman, where are the gifts?" Jesus asked as he came closer to Mary. He was looking very angered.
"I don't know, Jesus. They should have been here. I haven't touched them since you were a boy, as the angels instructed."
"Liar," he shouted. "Where are they?" Mary was stuttering as she was genuinely trying to tell him the truth. Jesus reached for her throat and began to squeeze tightly, while Mary began to gasp for air. "Where are the gifts?" I was afraid of Jesus and had accepted that what Joseph and Mary were saying was true. Perhaps it would have been divine justice for Mary to have been slayed by the being who inhabited her son's form, a being whose presence was ensured by her own selfish deed of sacrificing her own son to cover up her sin. But I knew she was a righteous woman, and I was not going to stand by and watch her be murdered. I felt great pity for Joseph, but he told me that his life was officially about to end. It was the only way. "Joseph has them," I shouted to Jesus. Upon hearing this, he immediately released Mary from his grasp and vanished without a trace. I ran to Mary and comforted her. I told her that she had to leave and I was willing to bring her with me, but she adamantly refused and told me, "This is my house and that is still my son. I can't let him go." I knew that she was delirious and in denial of the truth, but I couldn't waste any more time with her. I had to rid myself of these 3 gifts and fast. I trusted that Joseph would not reveal their location to Jesus, so I had time to get rid of them fast. I sent the gold off to the wealthy Longinus family back in Rome, a family who was renowned for the prestige and many expensive trinkets. The frankincense has gone down to Mariantania, to some Jewish Berbers that I know of. And last of all, the myrrh. I have attached to this letter for you, Simon. Keep it secret and keep it safe. Do not let anyone know about it unless you trust them. I'm sorry that I brought you into this, but I trust you deeply and you need to understand that there is something powerful happening that we or the scriptures cannot explain. Whatever this great conversion is, I fear that it may be something that we should potentially work against. Part of me hopes that the angel whom Joseph had spoken to was telling the truth, because part of me thinks that it could have been Satan, and we very well could be hindering God's plans. Either way, I have chosen my path and made my decision. Whether it will cost my life, I'll find out very soon. I want you to decide for yourself what you believe, Simon. I don't want you to be forced into a decision that could very well be the wrong one. You need to decide for yourself. I gave you the myrrh because if you find merit to Jesus, and he turns out to be on the right side of this whole conflict, I want you to return it to him. I would imagine the praise that he would give you, but if you deem him to be wrong and I and Joseph are correct, then hide the myrrh with all your strength. Go and find John the Baptist. He is somewhere in the wilds, but he shouldn't be hard to find. He has not stopped praising Jesus since he had baptized him. Sooner or later, he will get himself into trouble with the authorities. So make haste. Find him and find out for yourself if this is the truth. But keep your head down, dear Simon, and make sure that you're as certain before jumping to whatever conclusion you make. Forgive me if what I wrote may seem sacrilegious. I'm only telling you what I saw and what I have learned. Stay safe, my dear friend, and for the last time, farewell.